So to that end, I think we have a bit of time to take questions from the audience, and I'm going to ask you to ask questions rather than make speeches, if you don't mind. And there is no shortage of hands. So the gentleman at the back who just, you sir, yeah.
Can you speak about Obama's actions for Darfur and stopping the atrocities there? And is he supporting the ICC at all in a direct way or an indirect way? And what can we do as citizens to encourage him to support the ICC and particularly to indict Bashir?
I won't answer for Obama the man. I'll answer for my understanding of the U.S. administration, and that is that it definitely does support the prosecution of the highest level perpetrators of crimes against humanity and genocide in Darfur, including, you know, the head of state of Sudan. But it requires more than the U.S. saying, you know, we support the ICC doing this. The ICC is only as strong as its component state members. The U.S. Is not a member, but nonetheless has the ability to greatly promote the ICC as an institution, or to do it substantial harm, as you saw John Bolton did and would. The United States can provide financial support for the International Criminal Court. It can provide political support for the International Criminal Court. It can provide diplomatic sustenance for the isolation of leaders of states and states that protect leaders that are being and should be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court. There is now some equivocation by the United States over its relationship with Sudan and whether or not Sudan is going to continue to be a sponsor of terrorism. I think that that weighs into the question of the degree to which Sudan is being isolated unless and until it turns Mr. Bashir over to the court. But I think in general, the United States is quietly supporting the efforts of the ICC and providing assistance to the ICC in terms of its investigation. I do not think you will hear much in the way of public support for the ICC as an institution for some time yet, but I do hope that within the life of the Obama administration, that will come. The difficulty that the administration now faces is that the opposition to the ICC that has been built up through the Bush administration and is still very powerful, particularly within the U.S. military, I think is not an issue that the administration now wants to take head on, much the same as it, you know, probably would prefer to concentrate on health care and the economy rather than deal with the crimes of Bush and Cheney and Addington, et cetera. So I don't think you will hear much significant news in any public fora from the administration, but the administration certainly has, at the very least, stated that it wants to see that prosecution go forward. It will not stand in the way of that prosecution, and there are measures that it can take, as I said, in terms of providing material and economic assistance to the investigation and to the court, and to also participate in the process by which the court in general constitutes itself. There are these, you know, periodic meetings of the states' parties and review conferences that even other states that are not party to the court take part in, Israel. And And if the United States can be convinced to do that as well, I think, again, through the course of the Obama administration, and maybe in the first term of the Obama administration, these are some steps that it is not unreasonable to expect could happen, and would also provide a great deal of sustenance to the court, not just in the general sense, but in a very specific sense relating to its very legitimate desire to get its hands on Mr. Bashir.
Thanks for a powerful film. And I think two of the things that struck me the most, first on an international level, how the creation of this institution really revealed what you pointed out in your initial comment about the absolute impunity and inequality in power structure on both the international level, but also within societies, and how in that context victimization can be so severe and sort of multidimensional. And related to that, one of the men that you interviewed, I think maybe in the Congo, said really simply, there are lots of ways to deal with these problems. And so when you're in a situation where there are victims who certainly may not have access to the ICC and certainly very, very little ownership over it, how the role of the ICC is so important and yet limited in terms of resolving their victimization. And I'm wondering if you think, on the one hand, it's important that the ICC is a court of last resort. On the other hand, do you see a role for the ICC in perhaps providing these victims with a broader form of justice? I know that the court has a trust fund that's initiating some projects in these communities. And so I'm wondering if you could respond to the role of the court within sort of those two problematic realities that we face.
Well, yeah, one of the things you're really struck by when you work at the court is there's this thing that we call impunity gap, which is the court can only do very, very little in situations that are vast. And what you're hoping to do there is to spread at least the rules, so the law gets internalized. But then secondly, and this has happened quite a bit in the Congo, local courts also get vitalized by seeing the example of the ICC. And it's actually one of the most powerful things that the ICC can do, is to serve as a distant, strange, but a model nonetheless for domestic court systems and local courts. And one of my old colleagues is in the Congo now, and her work has a lot to do with this, and videotaping and audio taping ordinary citizens asking, why is it that when somebody comes and takes my cow, nothing gets done about it? I can't call a policeman and I can't go to court and do anything about it. And you see this process of people seeing Lubanga on trial and then using that realization, using that experience to try to create better systems, not just people, but the governments trying to create better systems at home. So that's what you're trying to do. The court has, you mentioned the trust fund for victims. I mean, the court also has functions of giving reparations at a community level. And it has used some of its funding to build schools, to support essentially any local ventures that kind of qualify as something that should be built up and deserves reparation as a result of the victimization and the conflict that happened there. And that's been interpreted very broadly. How the court's going to do in that mission is still an open question. And there are certainly people, and I would include myself among them, who feel that that's a pretty broad mandate for the court to have, because then the court becomes more like an aid agency. So my own selfish view is at the beginning years, the court might do better to really focus on what its core business is and then maybe get more ambitious as it got more of a track record. But I think in the communities, it's been very well appreciated for them to see other activities that the court can be involved in just making lives better. Not necessarily directly through justice, but in, building schools, holding women's groups meetings, having outlets for victims to talk about what happened to them, even if they're not going to be witnesses in court. These things are incredibly new. They're innovative for a lot of these communities.